Guy man dude and a fellow man guy and a guy man fellow. Mellow man guy and a mellow again fi again mellow and mellow. Guy man fellow and a mellow man guy man fellow man guy and a guy man bro and a bro fellow. Mellow man guy and a bry man go and a bellow man fry man gallow. Bellow man fry and a fry man go and a bro man fellow man brello. Guy man bro and a man bro guy man bro man fellow. Guy bro fellow man bro guy bye man fellow bro bye man. Bye man guy and a guy man fellow and a bro man fellow man guy man. Guy man fellow and a fellow man guy and a bro man fellow. Bro man guy, bro man fellow, little bro bye man fellow. Fellow man guy and a bro man guy and a bro man fellow. Fellow man guy and a fi man grow and a grow man fellow man gello. Fellow man bro and a bro man guy and a bro man fellow man brello. Guy man bro man guy, fellow man gello. Bye man fro and a fro man guy and a bellow man fellow man gello. Bye man fro and a fellow man guy and a little bro man fellow. Bro man guy and a bro man fellow and a fro man bellow man gello. What the? It gets worse every live stream. It's sort of like a stupid that just keeps making me get stupider. Bro man guy and a guy man bro and a bro man fellow man gello. Bro man guy and a fellow man bro and a bro man bellow man fellow. Bro man guy. Well, you know the rule. Once 30 people show up, hi. Greetings, programs. Your buddy Ingrid Bernal here. Hankrin Fernale back again on Drunkens and Dragons, the old Runehammer channel here on the YouTubes, where we play D&D just a little bit more better than we used to, like big old grown-ass men and women, living that life. You know what I'm saying? Rolling them dice. We're making sock puppets. We're making mac and cheese. We're eating plain Sicilian pizzas. We're drinking beer. In this case, I'm drinking iced coffee. It's delicious. It's cold, and it also is coffee. Guy man bro and a bro man guy. He's also known as a fellow. A bro man guy and a bro man fellow and a gallo man bro man gallo. Anyway, hi everybody. Let's jump right into it. Now, remember, we're still on a bye week for my Old School Essentials group, which is going to reconvene this Monday night. Very excited because we've been playing 6 months now, a little more than that. And for the first time, I have my basement set up as a D&D lair. I can say that D&D played in a basement, I mean, come on. It's pretty good. I mean, short of being in the south of France, sunbathing on your own mega yacht with your 10 best friends and independent wealth as far as the eye can see to aid the world with all of its humanitarian problems, playing D&D in the basement is one of the best things you can hope for. So Monday night, I finally get to host my group here at my own house, which is really going to be great because, and yeah, Adam, I will post a picture of the basement on Instagram, like maybe tonight. You've got some Christmas lights on the ceiling, the basic stuff. I also moved the bulbs that are hanging on the ceiling. So there's a bulb that is perfectly centered over the table. So you get that nice top-down shadowing that you want on a game table. It kind of gives it that dramatic look. It's really, really fun. And I just got myself, I know there's like $1,500 gaming tables out there that are maze balls, but I just got myself like a cheap little folding john with some little folding chairs, the ones with pads though, none of that metal stuff, because we're going to be sitting in these chairs for hours. But the cool thing about hosting, which a lot of you guys know, especially if you're the GM and you're the host, that's nice. That gives you a lot of options if you have more than one group going, or if the groups are intercombining or changing members week by week. You don't have to put it on someone else, the level of enthusiasm that you may have for the game. So as the GM, maybe you are the craziest, most enthusiastic person. That's often the case. So if you can also host, that gives you a lot of nice options to work with. Yeah, and I've never really had a basement lair to play D&D, if you can believe that. I've always played above the surface of the earth. So that's kind of sad if you think about it. All these years. I don't think I've ever really played in the basement. So there's that. It's awesome. But we had a couple weeks off because everybody's, got travel and family and stuff going on in the summertime. And work. We had some out of state work that was happening with one of our members and stuff like that. So we're about to not only reconvene on Monday night, but we're going to finish a super exciting, deadly, very dark, and very scary catacomb delve, which you guys found out in my last report video about, with the wraiths and these sort of high-end undead. And the second half of this catacomb session is not only going to be more exciting danger, which has been very question and dice driven as far as what the map holds in store for the players, but also this is a real turning point in my campaign. This is time to lay a lot of cards out on the table and sort of reveal a lot of what's been sort of hinted at and has been sort of under the covers up till now, needs to come out, at least in part, in the open, because we're at that point. You can only sort of not show the monster, so to speak, or sort of, reveal the workings for so long. And this is sort of a turning point and I think in all good horror films as well. It's that fun moment when the protagonist finds, this old collection of photos or this, newspaper clippings or something. You get to find out what the horror really is. Is this no, Ingrid was here last week. This is Hanker Inferno. But anyways, that turning point in a horror film, you kind of find out what happened. You find out what the tragedy was that led to this, malicious or malevolent ghost. And we're at that point. So not only we're going to have a high danger session where probability of death is something that's getting so imminent, I had to sort of talk to my players, which I also talked about in a live stream. But also, I'm going to need to and feel the urge to reveal some of the bigger sort of gears that are turning in my world to make things happen. And that leads to tonight's talk. So not only is that happening on Monday night, we also have a player who's been abroad for a while, and she has returned to the States. And so she's going to be re-entering the fray the following week. So that's exciting because anytime you mix up the membership, the dynamic changes. We're going to have another player who's been a diehard player who's going to be gone for a couple weeks on tour with his band. And then we have a brand new player who kind of is friends of friends, who I met, hanging out with friends the other night. And so on Sunday, going to hang out and we're going to get into some ideas for his character and how he might fit into this ever-growing story. So it's so cool now to have the lair to be able to support this growing sort of what I like to call our cult, our D&D cult, but it's kind of our player pool, as it's sometimes known. And some players, and this is something I'm learning to be more flexible with, some players are more dedicated than others. And some players don't really want to do, sort of side tasks when they're not at the table. They don't really want to research things and, get into all that. And other players are all about the research. And one part for me that I'm learning as a good game master and as a good host is to adapt and be flexible and appreciative with all those different play types and all those player types. And that's something, this is like an expansion area for me. This is like growing some new muscles for me, is adapting to, satisfying and appreciating all those different types in their own way and making it all mesh seamlessly together. So having my own basement zone is going to be really helpful for that goal, because I just want everybody to have a good time. All right. So that's the sort of situation as far as my game goes. We're going to be back in session Monday night. But tonight's live stream main topic, since we're not going to be doing a report, is I wanted to talk about, as the title of the stream sort of suggests, it's this evolution from thinking about rooms, sort of little mechanical spaces inside your game that are little playable video game boards, almost like Pac-Man boards, which I know I'm really known for on YouTube. That's like almost sort of how I made my name on YouTube, was doing these sort of Pac-Man boards, or, mouse traps as they're also known. But what I wanted to talk about tonight is how the same methods can lead to creating situations. And situation is a word that is interchangeable with a lot of words in our hobby. Sometimes these things are called fronts, like in Dungeon World. They're called factions. Some people just sort of lump it into world building, but these are kind of the large moving parts of your world that can be treated with great complexity or great simplicity depending on your style. So there is a lot of different ways in the hobby to talk about and approach and construct and run and make dynamic situations, world factions, world fronts, the bigger thing that's going on. So you have approaches that go all the way over to entire games, which all they do is develop factions and fronts, like Microscope or other collaborative sort of world building exercises, where you're just figuring out, why is this world even interesting? You know, is it just a continent where people are just, you know, doing humdrum, you know, semi-medieval feudal economic activity? You know, like everything's fine. Or is some great calamity coming? That's a common theme. Are there clashing factions or military factions? You know, is it a war of borders and nations that's occurring? Or another common theme is, are there deeper and more hidden factions which are at play? Yeah. Oh, Stars Without Number is a great example, Hunter. Exactly. Like, really gives you this feeling of a moving sort of current. And this current is interesting to us as players and GMs because it acts as an engine of ideas. And more so, and what I wanted to talk about tonight is that it can give rise and be given rise to by questions. So this question method is something I've been talking about a ton. And the most rudimentary type of question that I've been using in my sort of newer method of play is like, is there a door in this room? Maybe a very common question that a player would ask. Or is there treasure in this room? A super common question, right? And rather than having prescribed or prepared answers to such a simple question, we've been leaving it up to the dice greatly, and especially in a binary sense. So if you look at my OSE hack PDF that I released, a question like this has a binary answer. Either there is or there isn't a door, right? Is there a door in this room? I don't know. Let's find out. Bloop. Okay, that's the question method of building a dungeon room. And it can have more nuanced versions like, is there anything unusual about this room? Now, that's a question that doesn't have a binary outcome. It's going to ask a little more creativity on the side of the GM. But the same methodology of like responding to questions and generating questions, which is really what I want to be talking about tonight, can be applied on the biggest scale in your world. What could be an example? Like as a binary one, are there dragons in this world? Yes, I can tell you that without even rolling a dice. There are dragons in this world. This is kind of a classic D&D world, and I'm also going off of Dave Arneson's Blackmore sort of skeleton or sketch. And so, yeah, there are dragons. Okay, are they evil? Well, they're both. They're an entire species, so they're mixed. Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay, so we have some good dragons. We've got some evil dragons in this world. Where are they? Are they part of this story? Are they part of our story? Well, they haven't been so far. Okay, well, no, wait. We did meet the green dragon called Green Tooth, and she seemed to be a good dragon, but also mentioned her not so good brother. What's going on there? Now, I can't just give you the answer to that. Players need to go find out the answers to something that complicated. But what I can do in my off time is answer these sort of inevitable or natural questions. So if Green Tooth is a good dragon and her brother is a bad dragon, in our world, a dragon called Bloodwing, what's going on? I ask myself this. Then I say, well, they're conflicting with each other over the fate of the sort of the forest, but that conflict is starting to go beyond its borders. It's starting to become a problem for others. Okay, stop right there. Before you come up with a list of battles that had happened or exact locations where dragons have been sighted or maybe where they can be encountered in the future, or you get really let any of your sort of concrete or your plaster become set, become hardened in your world building, you just sort of stop right here. We know vaguely that this dragon situation is starting to outgrow its borders, namely the Redwoods Forest in Blackmore. Just stop right there. That's the only bullet point you need for now. So now the next one, and this is one that if you guys have been watching my live streams about this game and this campaign, you've got to be asking. If Admiral Akarov, the sort of arch vampire, the sort of Dracula Untold of our world, this extremely powerful, almost immortal sort of demigod-like vampire, if he has now been awakened and released into the world, what is his impact? Here's a question. And this is not a question that a player can really answer, but they're probably wondering the same question. But for you, you're asking yourself, well, what is his impact? Well, remember from the story, he definitely has a bone to pick with King Uther, who's also known as the Earl of Blackmore in our world. He's got a bone to pick and he wants his revenge. Stop right there. Before you get specific answers on how that revenge will take place, you just need to know that it's in motion. And these are what I call situations. Then we have one more big one in our world, which is the Skandahar. These sort of werewolf Vikings are coming down from the north and have ever been a problem for the Kingdom of Blackmore. And it's widely known that Blackmore is like militarily clashing with these guys. That's enough. Right there. Now my players are weaving their way through some of these different, what I call situations. And their questions about how things are playing out become the answers that become the truth. And me leaving those bullets so simple, like the dragons, for instance, we know that it's sort of getting worse and it's outgrowing its borders, but we don't know what's happening or where or exactly what's happening or why. We don't know or even really have interest in the extreme details. But what I do know is that there are dragons in conflict in this part of the world. And so as players sort of reveal portions of the map, you know, where you push the little cloud off the Mario map, occasionally I'm going to have a landmark or a sort of a thing or a scene that I know is ahead because I think it would be cool. And so I've got a bullet for it. In other cases, they use the map. We all know how handy a world map can be to players as they move around, as they navigate. They say, well, we're going to take this river. We're going to walk down this coast, so on and so forth. They did that. Then we see a dot on there that says Old Watch. It's a town. We start answering questions. What is this town like? Did the elves follow us? Can we find a ship here? These are all just questions. Instead of me being this sort of, you know, this repository of all potential answers, we're just asking questions as we play and giving answers that feel natural and reasonable. And these situations that I've been talking about, the expansion of the dragons, right? The coming of Akarov, this arch vampire, or the inevitable and slowly worsening invasion of the Skandahar, they don't have details. They just give us context to answer questions as they arise. Okay, and so what I want to talk about here is the freedom that this gives you to let go of what I think you guys might be sensing is a word that maybe makes people uncomfortable if it's in too large of doses, which is improvisation. Sometimes a world being improvised makes it feel sort of flimsy, right? You're just making this up on the spot. Like, are you even keeping notes for this? You're just making stuff up. You don't want to reach that point. And the concept of situations, to me, gives you this ongoing and real and consistent context. But it's not a series of actual details. Now, world building for game masters, Lord knows, is super duper fun. And like listing out the names of people who live in towns, who are important or who are sort of players, so to speak, who are kind of, you know, movers and shakers, important characters that maybe our players are going to encounter. But I would say, as fun as that can be, to save some of that stuff and let these questions build your world in a more dynamic fashion so that there really is a true response to characters' questions in the very bones of the world. And I think that's really gives you a very neat world. Now, on the other hand, yeah, you can totally just build a colossal world and it's just sitting there sort of ready to be discovered. But in my experience, especially recently, it becomes a bit more rigid. It feels a bit more static. Now, I'm not saying that the players need to be like the fundamental engine of events in your world, but that it is discovered and evolving as this story is unfolding. So, too much improvisation, I think, gives you a flimsy feeling to your world, but not enough gives you an almost like video game type feeling of a rigid world like Skyrim, which is a really cool world, but is relatively rigid, that you discover as it's written. And finding that in between spot can be done using the question method. Okay, so let's bring it all the way back down now to like where I'm at. So as this next session is approaching Monday night, I do what I do almost every week, which is I ask my partner these questions. I ask, what do you think could be a reason that a king would be locked in his chambers for weeks and no one's seen him? What could possibly be an explanation for that? And she might ask, well, isn't that vampire guy kind of floating around in your world now? Maybe he's, poisoning his mind. Maybe he comes in the form of mist at night and kind of gets in his dreams and he's got him thinking dark thoughts. Okay, nice. I like that. Let's put that down as an option. No, well, mate, wait, maybe there's like a servant who's actually sort of an enemy of the king who's been poisoning him slowly, but is in disguise. And the king has ordered everyone else to go away. Like you got a Grima Wormtongue type situation going on. Okay, interesting. Maybe the king is actually a sort of a dark player in this story, not a heroic character. And he's up there ruminating on his next evil scheme and he doesn't want to be interrupted and stuff. Interesting. So we have all of these ideas. And me just asking this question, what's going on here, do you think? Is to me is a lot more fun than just going to the notebook and saying, all right, well, the king is actually a bad guy. Oop, let's just write that down. He's been hiding in here because, and I guess what I'm suggesting here is that questions can be asked of yourself. I can ask myself, what is Greentooth going to do next? But I'm really starting to see that in my creative sort of journey that I'm on, asking questions of others is expanding where I'm going in far more interesting ways and interesting routes. And let me give you some concrete examples. In the past, my games, all the events and all the elements and all the variables always tied together. Always. And they tied together into a braid of events and details, which was completely centered around the players. The players weren't necessarily the superstars or the biggest heroes of the story, but they were intrinsic to the events. Like one of the most classic things I used to do so much is that players would always discover some kind of tapestry or fresco that they were portrayed in. They're prophesized sort of in a way, or they're part of some kind of loop that's centered on them. They're critical to the overall thing going on. But I've found that as I ask questions of others more so and scratch my head to adapt to what these answers mean, I get into a far more quilt-like approach rather than a braid. A braid being this kind of linear, detailed, twisting storyline. Whereas this quilt is more like a flexible, sort of larger space of believable events that are intertwining with the players freely moving through them. Now, I know that like sandbox and kind of open world and all these kind of buzzwords are things we all dream of in our games. But to be completely honest, I never really had that. I never really even wanted it. I wanted a very focused feeling storyline. So what are some examples of this kind of stuff? Well, I would say that like Predator as a film is a very braid-like story. Once they plop into that jungle, there is just kind of this narrow, confined, fast moving, in some cases, literal water slide of events that take them from the beginning to the explosion and the helicopter at the end, right? And that's how all my stuff was done for years as a game master. And I was actually very adamant about that being more fun. And you can see that in some of my older videos too. But with this particular group, this particular system, this particular time in my life, and like post-COVID, getting back to the table and the level of engagement and excitement I'm getting from these players, I'm finding that this quilt is working a lot better. They're walking away from things or coming at things in ways I never saw. And so I don't just have these sort of endless pressures coming in. So if you watch some of my older videos, especially probably my most popular video, which is the 3 ways to start your campaign, those are all very like focused and confined ways to kick a campaign off, to give it a lot of action and intensity. But in this campaign, we started the opposite way. We basically went to town and had various people moving around in a town that players could pursue, and different NPCs that were walking around represented different possible avenues. And at that beginning, I had no idea where they were going. If they were going to, pursue this kind of thing down here, or if they wanted to get more involved into like a more like a contract worker thing, or if they wanted to be more of a save the world type, or if they wanted to go darker than that and get into sort of the underbelly and stuff like that. And over time, I have not really known where they're going at a lot of different turns. And so this question method has now become my solution. So at its simplest form, does this room have a door? I don't know. Let's roll for it. At its most complex form, what could be the reason that a king in the center of these different moving parts in this world, which are all each contained really just in a bullet point, what could be the reason that he's been holed up in his chamber? And I saw earlier in it's Guy Calgary up here saying maybe the king is dead in this chamber. And since no one can get in, the doors are all like locked from inside. Maybe, it's a corpse that they find in there. Now, to me, that feels a little bit what's called on the nose. On the nose is a phrase that kind of means like, it's kind of like dun, dun, dun. It's like, here's the big reveal of the thing. Isn't this crazy? Whoa. You kind of saw that coming a little bit. And you kind of feel a little bit like, all right, okay. It can also be called like ham-fisted. Sometimes if a story sort of shift feels a little too big, and I thought this was kind of coming, it can feel a little bit like, okay. So I think what my approach is going to be, which is my prep technique, which is I always ask my partner, hey, what do you think could be a reason here? And then also asking players as we approach this sort of moment, this scene, and having a couple of my own answers. And so, Jason, this was kind of the thing I wanted to talk about here to wrap it up before we go to our Q&A phase. Is this was mentioned on the Runehammer Discord, is that I've sort of inadvertently documented this evolution that I'm going through on YouTube over the past 6 years. I've really have gotten so much into the hobby from 7 years to now. I haven't really taken a break. As I've mentioned previously, I do take, a couple years off from D&D in the past. I have, now and then to just kind of get away from it, but I have not done that now for quite some time. And I'm in it. And especially because the sort of just the player tone and saturation into a game, saturation into 5th edition and other things like that, all these different factors have led to this change in me. And I don't know if it's an evolution, because I still believe that sort of braid style playing, or that water slide style of playing and game mastering, is still really awesome. So I don't necessarily mean that want to say that I'm like sort of growing or getting better or something, especially because I'm a nincompoop. But I am changing over time, and I've kind of documented this. And to me, it's kind of interesting and exciting because part of doing these live streams on Friday is like sort of checking in with everyone where I'm at in my hobby, so that if you're facing challenges in your own, or you're stumped on something, or looking for inspiration or energy or direction, maybe my story can help to inform your story a little bit, can break a logjam you might be having, or send you off in a new direction you didn't see coming. So for me, creatively asking other people for explanations in believable situations has become a key creative technique. And a situation, that to me is an interesting concept I really have not played with that much. I've done much more like storylines in the past. The storyline being, there's a dragon who has decided that it needs the core of the earth to warm its eggs, and it's going to inadvertently destroy the world unless you stop this thing. Okay, whoa. Well, that's pretty focused. we're gonna go do that because we need a world to live on. Whereas in this Blackmore campaign, it's like situations. I really don't know what the vampire is going to do. I really don't know how the invasion of the Skandahar is going to play out. I don't really know what the fate or the status of the king is, the Earl of Blackmore. I don't really know where we're going to take the sort of the brother and sister dragon conflict that's happening in the Redwoods with the elves caught in the middle. I just don't know. And that feeling of like the floor not being there when you look down is the same feeling as if you don't have like a dungeon map in your journal. You just have a series sort of ideas of questions that can be asked as the dungeon unfolds. One of the craziest ones being like, how many more rooms are there in this dungeon? Let's roll for it. That's a feeling of really having the floor not there when you look down. But I think what's happening is I'm getting more and more used to it. I'm getting used to that feeling. And then you're doing your world building and your note taking and your bullet writing after the fact. So it doesn't just wind up being improv all the time. You are setting it into concrete. You are building with stone. Once an answer has been provided, it is a truth in your world now, but you just use simple believability to keep things rolling. If a town is destroyed, for example, there's probably going to be some kind of military response to go help do some rebuilding, to make sure the town is secure, and to look for the perpetrators. And then if that is resolved, that military unit is probably going to return to its home port or home base, wherever that may be, and that's going to be somewhat resolved. If a dragon is slain or it crashes on the landscape, there is likely going to be a sort of party deployed to go investigate the corpse of this dragon, to harvest parts and pieces of it and to gather them up and return them to the royal coffers and so on and so forth. These are just sort of things that seem reasonable to occur. That has become the sort of the new rally cry of my world building technique. And to me, this may sound like incredibly banal, but to me, it's really working in new and interesting ways. Instead of me just saying, well, this big old dragon's going to keep on chewing away at the core of the world, and like the tectonic plates are sinking into the ocean and stuff. You better get together. Like, you better get to the library and find the magic books so that you can unlock the giant vault so you can get the magic sword. And the magic sword's the only way to stab this thing in the eye, but you can't reach this thing till you go down through the tunnels. But the only way you're going to go through the tunnels is if you get the guy who knows how to navigate them. You go and you, right? That used to be how I kind of did things. Now it's just more like, well, that last thing happened that you guys did. What would be a reasonable outcome of that? Like, what would naturally happen next? This stuff. Oh, okay. Well, then that's set in stone now. So that is like a method that I want to propose to you guys. And like so many of the things that I'm slow to realize, it probably seems somewhat obvious. It should feel obvious. That means it's really logical and really intuitive. And I like that. I like logical, intuitive. That makes me feel really good. Okay. So that is just what I wanted to talk about tonight. It's a nice, tight, kind of simple idea about just using simple questions and believability to let things evolve in a way that just feels reasonable, because you know the 4 or 5 moving pieces in shorthand terms of your particular world. and how those might or can evolve over time, rather than putting this burden on yourself of thinking it all out and seeing it and sort of preparing it. It's more like discovering it. And I think that is really fun as far as making the GM a player in your own game rather than the sort of architect of everything. So that is all I've got as far as the big thing for tonight. If you guys want to chuck some questions at me, we can hang out for just a minute. Yeah, I'm getting hungry. I've had a very, very busy couple of days, kind of been working like a dog all week to get stuff done that I'm sure you guys know is coming. It just sort of takes time. I also have a little surprise release, a little card game that I've been sitting on for over a year. The design finally came together literally yesterday, last night. So if you guys saw on the gram, I finally had a really good play test on the modified version of the design. Got all the cards rejiggered and got everything ready there. So that's exciting. It's really weird to sit on a release for so long and then, finally. 2 seconds. Okay. Let's get to these questions. What's up, Alice there? Nice to see you again. More iconic tavern owner facial hair. Mutton chops or handlebars? Mutton chops all the way. Mutton chops all the way. Handlebar mustache is more like a blacksmith. How can you use situations on building a campaign? By the way, before I move on from Alistair, the coolest tavern keeper was in the Battle Chasers game. Joe Madureira's art is so awesome. Okay. Sorry, brain freeze there. Okay, how can you use situations on building a campaign? Well, do you ever really build a campaign? I think a campaign is a thing that happens, not that is built. I don't think it's like, okay, guys, I have the campaign ready. Here are 30 sessions worth of gameplay. I'm not sure that building a campaign is a thing that happens ahead of the campaign being played. I think a campaign is a thing that is discovered and played and hewn from the bedrock of non-existence rather than built and planned and set up. If you take Rise of the Rune Lords, for an example, to me, Rise of the Rune Lords is the sort of the braid method that I used to do my worlds. It's a very like a storyline that one thing leads to the next as far as discoveries and events that escalate to a crazy cool conclusion. And that conclusion is known at the beginning of Rise of the Rune Lords. And the players kind of work through it like an awesome set of movies. And it's totally cool. I'm proposing not knowing that, not knowing what's ahead. So the players' decisions really they truly do have agency to move through believable situations in a way that's going to be discovered, not planned. I hope that makes sense. But that is the core. And thanks for asking, Welton. That is kind of what I'm hammering on tonight, just because it's what I'm discovering in my game. The Remarkable is awesome. Yeah, I love the Remarkable. It's a sort of a new style drawing tablet that I used entirely. All the art in Viking Death Squad was done on the Remarkable. In addition to your past drawing vids, can you do a demonstration using the Remarkable? Absolutely. Great idea. Let's totally do that as a video. I'm a huge fan of the Remarkable. I really want that company to succeed. I would love to bump them up on YouTube. Picture point. Updates on RuneCon. You know what? We were thinking about using Mace down in North Carolina as kind of a landing point for RuneCon, but I still don't think that we're out of this whole pandemic situation. It's proving to be very difficult for the human race to overcome this thing. So really, until the world is safe from that, especially like there are some people who are still in danger because of it, and we don't want to be part of creating more danger. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of not over yet. And so I think until we really have it beat, talking about conventions is still a little bit difficult. So no real updates there. Perkins, what's up? Have you given player dreams or visions, giving vague information? We do have a player who has a crystal ball, a scrying stone, and we do use that to give some sort of bird's eye view hints But no, I don't really use dreams and visions. That's an interesting idea. But sometimes to me that can feel like overly baiting to a player. If I give them a dream or a vision or something, they're gonna think like I'm leading them to something, and they're gonna take that bait very literally, and that feels a little strange to me, almost like kind of steering them down that road. And I'm not sure I'm into that. I'd have to be really nuanced to do that in a creative way. I like how Dune did it. So if I could do a vision kind of like, Paul's visions and how vague they are and really cool. So vague, you did mention vague is kind of the key word there, right? But I haven't really done that yet. That's a stretch area for me. I could get into that. Have you, here we go, Lord of Darkhouse. Have you presented your players with a prologue to kick things off? They kind of created the prologue, but yeah, I do introduce them to the world. So I did tell them, like, you live in this town called Newgate. All of you have sort of taken to the road, though. You're not from this town. So you're kind of out on the road together, and you've been together for some time. But why are you together? Who are you? And they kind of built the prologue for me in a lot of ways. We didn't really talk about the details of the world because they're fun to discover. So we didn't really say, like, we're in an age where, we did kind of say that there's a little bit of a decline happening in the world. And that was a very vague sort of reference to the fact that the king is on a bit of a decline, but didn't really have a full explanation for that. Do you do everything is in turns with variable time scale, or something you move away from? I use turns. The short answer, yes. I use turns to keep the table organized and to make sure everybody gets a spotlight. So some players, can really ruminate and think a lot and talk a good bit. And so I'll use a turn to kind of wrap that up and say, okay, yo, Jimmy, where are you at? Let's talk about what are you doing and what are you saying here? And the turn becomes just a way to keep the table moving so that you don't get this kind of just talky kind of, craziness. And so I think the short answer is, yeah, I really do stick to a turn type structure of how we talk at the table, who answers what questions when. So even if we're not like in combat or something, it's sort of still moving around the table one by one to keep everybody in the spotlight. How do I narrow it down from a bajillion ideas for a campaign and pick one and go? Paradox of choice. Benny, just what's the coolest one? What's the thing you're most interested in? Another technique is, when we started our game, I said, what kind of themes do you guys think are cool in fantasy? And they said two things, like undead stuff is kind of cool, and like winter kind of themes are cool, but not like Game of Thrones. Like, don't tie them together in such an on the nose kind of silly way. But those two themes kind of sound neat to us. Bang. Thank you, Azimuth. The number of the beast. A little beer money there. How often you focus on plot points to a player's background? As much as players are hitting me offline. So if we're off session and texting each other, and I have a player, which I do right now, who's deeply invested in their role and their backstory and what it has to do with the events, then, let's run with that a little bit. Not so much that other players feel like background extras, but I like to reward offline research and play and depth in a player by making them a little more intrinsic to what may be happening in the next session. Here we go. My group has been hesitating to have adventures where players have multiple PCs, but after watching Suicide Squad, I can't handle multiple PC stuff. That's too much for me. I mean, unless it's like a simple funnel type thing, that can be cool. But multiple PCs to me just, whew. Oh, Alistair, do have players craft their own items? Absolutely. No strong opinion there, but I like to keep it very minimal. We do recipes as well. So as our botanist in our group sort of discovers more unique plants, which really just come from the question method, when it feels reasonable, like in a subterranean environment, finding glowing mushrooms and stuff like that, we establish a recipe. And then again, this retroactive method. So then we decide on the recipe. Well, if you take 2 king's foil and 1 glow shroom and boil them over fire, you get a heal potion. And we don't have that written ahead of time, like as a GM prep thing. We agree on it as GM and player, and then write it down retrospectively, and it becomes canon or becomes law right there. So that's what I mean by this retrospective technique. I didn't prepare the campaign and write down these recipes. We discover them together and then record them, and they become truth. Voco, thoughts on running 0-level character funnel in OSE? Absolutely do it. Go for it. Give each player, 3 1-hit point farmers and send them running terrified through a field as giant spiders invade the village. It's like the most simple one. See who survives, and then they get more interesting names and they become the heroes that go into the campaign. Hell yeah, it's a great idea. DCC is brilliant with that stuff, and there's a lot of great thinking in DCC about how to do it and make it fun. Welton, watching your videos, cool. And think about situations. How do you use companions? I don't that much. We do have NPCs kind of coming and going, but a companion, I don't like a companion to like have a turn or to take up table time really. So we keep it very sort of lightweight. So companions or NPCs that are tagging along with the heroes kind of stay a little bit out of focus, unless they're needed, like in the case of the giant octopus attack. So where an NPC actually became pretty clutch, but that was a player idea. So the companions don't have that much of their own separate reality. I discovered Dungeon World. Hey, yeah, Christian, awesome. No, I never really got a chance to run or play Dungeon World in any robust way. It just deeply affected my thinking from the moment I read it onward. But some elements of it to me are a little bit counterintuitive, but a lot of people love it. So yeah, rock on. It just was very mind expanding, that book. I really enjoyed just entertaining the ideas in that book. Same with something like Burning Wheel. I haven't really sat down and played Burning Wheel with anybody, but I love that book, and I like how it's kind of challenges your brain. Pyronide, rewarding outside. Yeah, do you feel weird if it's only one? Yeah. Well, you know what, Pyronide, this is inevitable in what we enjoy doing in our hobby, that some people are into it more than others. And what I'm learning is, A, it's totally okay. Don't come at people and expect them all to be as much into it as each other. But B, I can't help but be attracted a little bit to someone who's fanning my flames of how interested I am in all this stuff. So if I have a player that's sort of more into it, it's not favoritism. It's just they're co-creating it with me in an active way in an ongoing faculty. Honestly, this particular player is probably the one more in danger than the others. So it's not like there's an award or a reward for this level of engagement. It's just I can't deny that that's fun. That's what I do in the hobby. It's come up with these intertwining ideas. And so if someone wants to engage with me of those intertwining ideas, I mean, fuck, let's do it. Let's go hang out and talk about this stuff. And it's going to find its way into the game because that is the hobby. So I don't see it as favoritism. Leather Guru, 5e Amethyst. Oh, getting them to play and engage is like herding cats. Yeah, that is a tough conundrum. Like, you're like, you guys kind of never show up and you aren't barely engaged. And so let's call this off. I'm going to try to set up something new that maybe, is a little more suited to what's going on. And they say, no, don't cancel it. That is a tough one, man. But I got to say, if you're the GM and you're feeling like energy drained by this, I mean, herding cats, that is not a very flattering or positive view of what's going on. I would say don't do things in life that aren't energizing and exciting you. Just life's too short to be sort of drained. So I would say kind of go for it and like be positive about it and set a new standard and find a new form of fun that fits what you're looking for. Chase what you want in life. Being the sort of GM that's like this sort of shackled GM is really draining. And I'd have to say go for it, even though it might be a little difficult. I'm not sure what D&D 1.1 is. I'm not sure. So I guess no, I haven't played that. MM, I have more fun as DM when I discover what happens. Feel like I'm a player. Yeah, me too. As opposed to being an architect. Though I don't want to improvise everything. Well, that's exactly where I am, MM. I don't want to improvise everything because it feels flimsy. So, I have notes. I mean, it's not like I don't make notes. I make, boatloads of notes. You guys know how I am. I think on paper. And these notes become concrete truisms. But yeah, I like to be a player too. I like to roll dice and I like to discover things and be surprised and have fun. Have you played Warp Shell lately? No, I've been completely just in playing OSE. We've been playing Star Wars in our other weekly group. Yeah. The last real Warp Shell I think we played was our Lizard crew. We played an all Reptoid crew that was really, really cool. The Fangs of Kilvastri, which some of that sort of game that we did, that campaign that we did, found its way into Index Card RPG Master Edition as a sort of a proposed Warp Shell campaign. So that was really, really fun. Being all Reptoids was really cool. Tips for running post APOC. I don't have a lot of help there. What would be motivating forces to explore? Man, that's tough. Post-apocalyptic to me is very difficult because some of the stresses of real daily life, of actual modern life, kind of remain in a way that I don't really like. It doesn't feel as free of a world. The only way that I like post-apocalyptic is it's like way the hell post-apocalyptic, like Viking Death Squad or I don't know, Sword of Shannara or something. Like, it's so far post-apocalyptic that it's not like this, broken, burning, ruined landscape. Or not even broken and burning, but like post-civilization, but there's burning cities or something. I don't know. I have a real hard time with that. Like zombie type stuff, I just am not much of a help there. I see how people enjoy it and it's cool, like the whole survival element and stuff like that, but I just don't have a lot of experience with it. Our Star Wars game is taking a crazy turn. At the beginning, I play an Ugnaught named Guido, and I did not want to mess with any Jedi stuff because it felt too sort of on the nose. But as our game has evolved, for reasons I don't fully even understand, I wound up with a lightsaber in my hand and kind of did have a moment of sort of using the Force that really my character is like the short character too. So it's kind of, we're going into our 7th session next week, and he's sort of taking on the Jedi role, which is crazy. I did not see that coming. So I'm going to sort of, for the final 3, we're doing 9 games. So it's like doing a trilogy. Each 3 games is 1 movie. So we're doing 3 movies. And in the 3rd movie, I'm kind of revealed as like the Jedi Ugnaught character. So that's kind of crazy. We have a Wookiee, we have a decommissioned Imperial officer, and then we have an old Clone Wars droid. And it's been really great. It turns out that the Sith have developed this way to have sleeper agents out in society who can be activated at any moment to become Sith, and we're trying to put a stop to it. Sorry, I fell behind a little bit there. What's your Star Wars character? Oh yeah, Guido, the Ugnaught, Jedi Ugnaught. Tips for running campaign with 3 groups in the same world. Yeah, all the same tips. Let them decide where they're going and what they're doing. And if their actions intertwine in some way, then get, like reasonable answers that make sense. But I wouldn't try to mastermind it like some kind of Rubik's Cube of all the 3 groups intertwining in some preconceived way that's cool. I would just let it go. Let it happen organically. Player-facing roles, Adam, good question, are really cool. I like defense roles. I like saving throws a lot, but I don't like doing only player-facing roles because I'm a player. I like rolling dice. So I'm not into systems that don't let me roll dice as the GM. I want to roll. It's too fun. Keon Cobra, we're playing the West End Games Star Wars. Later, Maponomicon. Yeah, Viking Death Squad, by the way, is if you played in the beta Red 5 or something like that, it really has become refined in its final form, and really excited for that to hit the world in the near future. Do you feel like, this is Stefan here, Genesis is great? No, I don't. For one thing, I just didn't like that sort of generic feel in the book. I don't like the symbols and stuff. I find a lot of it counterintuitive for reasons I don't know why it's counterintuitive. And I also haven't really played it, so I don't know if there's a lack of player death. Sorry, I don't really have a good pile of information there. Daniel, do you prefer less character creation or oodles like Pathfinder? I like less. I see how people like oodles a lot because it's fun to build builds and to conceive of intertwining synergies and stuff like that. But I really feel that less is a fun way to put the burden on what's gonna happen, not the process of building the characters. The characters come together in a matter of minutes, and the excitement is on rolling the stats, and then the focus is really on what's happening now, not necessarily the build that has led you to the beginning. So yeah. Your campaign sounds awesome. Yeah, thanks, man. Do you encounter situations where rolling for it didn't work or led to frustration? Yeah, we did have one encounter where this buccaneer had used these cursed gems in our world, and they summon bad things whenever they're used. And he summoned blink dogs, which usually appear in packs, but because I use a dice, only one of them appeared. So it was really dumb. It's like this guy fleeing across the beach being chased by one dog. It was like really silly looking scene. And yeah, that felt lame to me. But generally no, we go with it and talk it into being cool. Favorite underrated monsters? Oh, I don't know. Are rust monsters underrated? Yellow mold. I love monsters that basically have like a save or die type mechanic to them. They're very absolute feeling. I like that a lot, like black pudding. But underrated, I'm not sure what that fully means. Like dark mantles, ropers. Um, I really like a monster that is less known because just seeing it, it's fun to describe it to the players, and then they figure out sort of what it is, and they kind of write down notes about it, and it's like ecology, learning dungeon ecology. So any of the more oddball ones I really do like, but it's kind of like saying all the underrated ones. So I don't have a great answer there, but and here we go live. And then, yeah, it's almost 8, so you need to get some dinner in this body. How do you feel about IP games like Alien, One Ring, Conan, Star Trek? I mean, for me, I have a bit of a hard time playing in a world that already exists, like in movies and stuff, because I don't really feel like we're creating it. Even Star Wars is a little challenging for this because Star Wars, stormtroopers, it's all kind of already there. So the discovery isn't quite as exciting, but it is cool. And, like playing an Alien is really cool. God knows that's cool. Playing in Lord of the Rings is really cool. It's just not something that I do in my table. But yeah, if it were me playing, I think Conan probably is my favorite. And Modiphius's Conan is really, really damn good. I mean, 2D20 is cool, but I think, yeah, I would more like play in Conan's world and play it maybe ICRPG style. Just because I can work in that format with such freedom, or OSE type style. Yeah, but like IP games can be really cool, but they can also be kind of lame because they lean on the IP in some cases. Unfortunately, I kind of feel that way about Free League's Alien. I really didn't like that book at all. But the system seemed really cool. It fit Alien really cool, but I just didn't like how that book was presented. It just, for a super fan of Alien, like a lifelong fan of Alien, that book did not hit what I was hoping it would be. Like as a Giger fan and stuff like that, I didn't feel that power. But yeah, the Alien universe is just absolutely ripe. Would be really, really cool. Lord of the Rings maybe a little bit less so, just because we all know so much about it. So that discovery to me is a key part of playing in your own world and not an IP. Hey, Pedro, thanks a lot for the beer money there. Clone Wars campaign. Any tips? Yeah, find a part of the Star Wars universe that's less known, like The Mandalorian did. Try to avoid the stuff we saw in the movies and plumb new depths. And don't forget the variety that Star Wars has, like giant creatures versus lots of stormtroopers, and weird little cultures versus just the Empire all the time. Look for those little hidden crannies in the Star Wars universe that are so creative, and feel free to create parts of the Star Wars universe rather than having to have a Rancor, and you have to have the elements we've already seen. Go for some uncharted territory. 1000. No, I don't know about that. That sounds interesting. There's just so much. Yeah, there's just a lot to explore in this world. Alistair again, as a man with Lord of the Rings tattoos, new Amazon series. Oh, I think it's going to be awesome. I mean, Loki was like one of the best shows ever. So fun and so well done. And if they can live up to that Marvel level that's been hitting, It's just going to be great. It's also takes place in the Second Age, which is a little known age in Lord of the Rings. It's talked about more in the Silmarillion rather than in the books, and I think it's just going to be awesome. Yeah, Lankmar is really neat. Yeah, totally agree, Keith. Lemuria, yeah, I got put onto that and took a little glance at it last week. Looks cool. And yeah, ICRPG Aliens is definitely a thing. I also did my kind of tribute to Aliens called Xeno Dead Zone. If you want to grab that, it's on drive-through, and I'm a huge fan of all that stuff. Yeah, and using Stars Without Number to do Star Wars, I think is a great idea because it'll spin you into new directions that aren't just recreating the movies. But there are part of the Star Wars universe that you just want to do. You want to steal an Imperial shuttle. You know what I mean? You want to wear, stormtrooper armor. You want one of your group to be a Jedi. You want a sort of super strong, really loyal Wookiee. Some of these things are just so rock solid in their themes that you kind of just want them to play out again and again. Doozers all the way. Smurfs cannot fuck with doozers. Doozers are my shit. I love doozers. Oh my God, Trevor Miller. Me and you, same page. Can you share info on the card game? Yeah, it is called Pirate's Crown. It's a pixel art pirate game. It's kind of a relatively simple game. It's not like Magic the Gathering or something. It's kind of it's a play it in the hallway at the con type game. It's just card games, especially when they're small and lightweight and easy to understand and play, are really quite difficult to develop. So it kind of builds on a really simple mechanic that I hope people find familiar and stuff. And really excited to just get it out there. It's just got a fun, kind of bright-hearted feel to it. And I just wanted something that would kind of, keep people's brains spinning, knowing I just not all Viking Death Squad all the time. I'm still trying to keep a spectrum of ideas in the oven. And yeah, hey, that's it for tonight, you guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. 130 of y'all. Be sure to catch up with me on the gram. And if you can join my Patreon for $1 stinking a month, and you get like sort of all the sort of hidden updates, and that gets you on my Discord server as well. I know a lot of us are getting onto 3-4 Discord servers these days. It's getting a little crazy, but we have a nice little tight-knit family over on the Runehammer Discord where it's just day by day. It's sort of a daily hangout zone for not only peeps who are just into what my Runehammer news may be, but everybody who's working on their own games, and also some games form on that channel and come together for groups that have now become like ongoing groups. Because a lot of people are still playing online. So yeah, that's a great way to keep up with what I do. Otherwise, I'm throwing up posts here and there on the IG. So you guys, it's great hanging out with you as always on Friday night for an hour or two. Expect a much bigger stream next week because I'm going to have this whole catacomb sort of king reveal session under my belt, and we're going to get to talk about it all next Friday. So you guys have a great weekend, and if you got a session coming up, may your dice roll high. Make this world just a little bit more better than you found it in the coming week. Strength, honor, and beer. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. As always, this old hankering Farinale. Keep it real, and I will see you on that old internet. Have a great week, you guys. See you next Friday. He's a bro man fellow, and he's a guy man dude. He's a fellow man bro, and a guy man dude.